Hey, you're listening to Blindsight. Let's go. Mental health isn't something to take lightly. It's time to fight. It's time to thrive. Let's do this.
Hey there. Welcome to Blindsight. This is your host, Bill Lundgren, and we're going to be talking about what for a lot of people is not a fun topic, but I hope you'll get a sense that there is a lighter side to it, and that's stress and getting out of stress. And it's going to be a program where the guy in the most stressful position, our producer, Jonathan Price, and I, who just had a whole bunch of crises occur right before I was to go on the air. So between the two of us, we can cover the subject from
That's right.
vast experience. Yes. So let's all take a deep breath. And I got the dog out, so I figured he's at least
there
comfortable. So anyway, so how are you, Jonathan, today?
I'm good. That blizzard, that snowstorm was awesome. My kids had the day off of school, and they had a late release the next day, and we actually had a really fun day on I guess that last Thursday where we built this massive snow fortress around our fire pit that was probably almost 6 feet high.
You're kidding.
And then we built it around our fire pit. And so then we cleared out all the snow out of the fire pit and built this really big bonfire in the fire pit and ate chili by the fire while it was still snowing. And it was awesome.
Oh, that is awesome. That's great.
It was a memory for sure. Yeah. My back and my muscles and everything else are still screaming at me for doing that. Because this snow, if you guys aren't from Colorado, we get these snows in March and April that are anywhere from 4 inches to probably 15, 16 inches. It just depends. But that's not the issue. The issue is that it's so wet and so heavy that the water per square inch of snow is so much more concentrated than we get in December and January. Because in December and January, it just kind of blows off everything, and it's super light and fluffy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but this is very wet and heavy snow. The nice thing about that is, though, that the roads are already clear and they're almost dry. Oh, okay. So you get 14 inches of snow and there's nothing on the roads.
Yeah, well,
so it's awesome.
Well, I had to laugh because I have Alexa, and I kept asking, when is the snow going to stop? It says, in about 45 minutes. That was yesterday morning, the Thursday morning rather. And kept saying it'd only be 3 inches of snow. Uh-huh. And I looked outside and I said, no, I think there's a little bit more than 3, but so much for the accuracy of the weather report.
I know. Yeah, we got 14 inches in our backyard.
Did you? Yeah, I think we have about that much here. So the dog was delighted. He's yanking me all over the place.
Uh-huh. Yep.
But anyway,
for sure.
So in some ways that snow was a stress reliever because it got us out exercising and moving around. You may have been hurting after the snowstorm with the weight of the snow and the fire pit and so forth. But that's really one of the major things to relieve stress is to get out and do something physical.
That's right.
To get it out of our system. But what we were talking about is when we get stress on a continual basis, not just the stress that occurs like we were just talking about, but stress day after day. And so many of us get into that situation where even, when you think about it, trying to get used to dealing with a physical disability is stressful because for example, for those of us who are blind, just trying to figure out where things are. And I put some papers down. I had to use the Helen Keller method to find them because I wasn't paying attention when I put the paper down. And, and it just, when you have a deadline or whatever, you just put extra stress on yourself. And then, when there's one thing after another, which is what happens, we have all that cortisol going through our system, and that's our fight and flight response. The thing that, as I've said before, is what enabled Homo sapiens to survive. Is still in us, and it sometimes is way out of line to what is necessary. And so we have this stress day after day, and the body. And the one thing about the human body that I keep stressing with people, it tries to adapt no matter how screwy the situation is. And so your body gets used to having all this stuff flowing through the body and being in this fight or flight response all the time, and it becomes normal. And then when you stop, when all the stresses that you've been working with are over with, then your body says, what's going on? There must be something to be anxious about because, you've been that way all along. And what do you mean things are calmed down? No, there's something, the shoe is going to drop and this is going to start all over again. So the body is preparing itself for that possibility when you don't need it to. And it's that human instinct that is from the cave person day. I have to do gender neutral with rather than cavemen as we used to do with cave people. That's how they survived. And, so we're going to have that period of time where the body is just very, very anxious. And in extreme cases, for example, the vets returning from a war zone, they have the experience of not being able to get their body to calm down. That's what we call the feedback, where a car backfires and the vet dives under the table because of the memory of being in a war zone with shots ringing all around. And a lot of times people have to be, they've had a continual stress like that. They have to many times get professional help through the process of being able to change the brain to understand that they're no longer in a war zone or they're no longer under siege. And sometimes when that happens, you have the opposite where it just feels like you're going to collapse because all that energy is gone. And you, in fact, what your body is trying to do is get you to calm down so it can replenish itself. It can realign itself to the new situation. And even some of the therapy that's done now with PTSD takes the person through a kind of hypnotic state where they're in their mind reliving that particular situation, but also viewing it with a logic coming in. And this is what I've said over and over on this program, that we have the emotion and the logic, or the intellect, and the two have to work together. But when you're in that heightened state, it's real hard to step back and say, wait a minute, I don't have to get all stressed out, or I don't have to have this reaction. And with some of the what we call the EMDR process, people are in that situation that caused the initial symptoms, but their logic mind is saying, "Oh, I don't have to continue to have this experience." And when the logic comes in, when the intellect comes in, it works with the emotions, it acknowledges the emotion, but lowers the frequency, the degree of stress the person feels until it becomes more manageable, and we can be in a state like, for example, I was talking about being stressed out as I was setting up for this today's session. I had to laugh because, we're talking about stress, and here I am, running around like a chicken without a head.
Sure.
And I had to kind of step back and say, wait a minute, okay, this is the way I have to, the order of way I have to do certain things in order to be able to connect at the right time, to take the dog out, which I thought was important. The other stuff is less important, and none of my listeners can see the state the study is in right now. It was all over the place, so I don't have to worry. But you have to tell yourself that in the midst of a stressful situation, and you also, if the stress is going on day after day, you also have to be remembering one thing, and that is self-care. Even though it's a stressful situation and you have to be hypervigilant, as we call it, you still can also say, look, I need to do some meditation, or I at least need to do some deep breathing, as I said in the beginning of the program. Take a deep breath from your belly. Fill your, let your belly out so it takes in all that air into your lungs. Let it out very slowly and let the air out, and then do it a couple more times. And that sends a signal from the gut to the brain that says calm.
Yeah. Well, there's in my mind, there's 3 steps of stress. And the first step is the pre-stress phase, where you may be anticipatory of something. And this isn't always the case. Like, you can't always anticipate necessarily being in a car accident, or anticipating a medical diagnosis, or something that is kind of out of the blue. There's the anticipatory stress of maybe going through a rough family situation, or like
but you see,
a speech,
our body
or
doesn't know that they don't have to. Just think because it's stressful, the body has to react, fight or flight.
Right. And so that's kind of the pre-stress phase, where your body is trying to decide if it's going to fight or if it's going to flight, or if there's just this calm, this needs to be okay. I'm okay. That's that freeze. Yeah. I like to add that freeze method in there.
Yeah. And that's what there's kind of force ourselves to remember, there is another alternative.
And so the second phase is the in the moment stress, the actionable stress items, where you are in the throes of stress. Your schedule has been thrown off. You're giving a speech. You're going through PTSD. You've come back from battle. You're in that constant state of awareness and stress, and your mind is hyperactive and hypersensitive to the environment around you. You're hyper aware of how your body feels. Your adrenaline takes over. You feel less pain. You feel less, influx of emotions and decrease of emotions. You're very hyper alert. And that place where you stay, where you can get in trouble for staying in a long time, is kind of what you were referring to, where we get in that state of constant stress that it becomes normal. Yeah. And that normalization of stress is very damaging to our bodies. It's damaging to our heart, our gut health, our brain chemistry, our relationships, and all of those things. they play a massive role in that constant state of stress. And I want to come back to the state of stress in a minute.
Sure.
But that third phase of stress is a very interesting one, where you can take a look back at your stress and say, was I really needing to stress about that? Did I really need to worry about that? Especially when you address it head on. And when you address it head on, you give light to that stress and you give light to those situations. And one, it's either going to exasperate it or it's going to decrease that level of stress. So if you are coming back from, like for our veterans, if you come back from war or you come back from a very stressful mission or assignment and you go through some counseling or you go through some PTSD treatments or the EMDR therapy, you're going to be able to deal with those stresses in a much different way.
Right.
Now, the mindset of stress, I believe, is such, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it takes a different level of thinking to be both in a state of stress and to be aware of the stress and process it in real time, where you could have the ability to say, I'm really thankful for this stress because I know on the other side it's going to make me better.
Right.
And it's a accepting of the stress. And it doesn't have to be, every stress, because there are some that are just, you have to process it.
Yeah.
Kind of like grief. You have to process, you have to deal with it. But if you can capture your thoughts and capture your mental makeup and your body and understand what you need to do in those stressful situations, you can look at it and say, man, I'm so thankful that I went through that season of life that was super stressful. And it becomes a tool for growth rather than a beating down of issues. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but I want to get your thoughts.
Well, what you're saying is celebrating in a sense that you survived that stress and knew how to handle it. And rather than looking back, oh, that's terrible, or beating yourself up because you got caught up in it, because when we get through it, it's an opportunity to learn. If we use it. And this is what I mean by the intellect coming in. Okay, what am I learning from this? Well, number one, I know how to make choices, and I have to trust myself. And situations like this are going to come up. And, I'm going to just put in a sidebar. Sometimes pleasant things produce some of the same body reaction as
Isn't that funny?
Anxiety reaction we talk about, or awful things happening, and our bodies are, get all confused.
Yeah.
And it's very stressful. At the end, what is the product, and what you were talking about, and looking back on it, is also some exhaustion. Because what happens, you've had all this adrenaline and cortisol going through your system, and your body was taking a beating. And when you finally relieve the stress, whether you're out of the stressful situation and you're able to use your mind to look at it and to understand that you depleted an awful lot of stuff in your system, and that it's going to take some time for your body to rebuild and create what is an accurate normalcy instead of what you thought was normal, or your body was telling you was normal before. And that takes little time.
An accurate representation of that is when you have a spouse or you have a partner who has gone through domestic or physical or sexual abuse, and that time of intimacy that you normally would have with your partner is now tainted because of that trauma or that traumatic experience. And something that is supposed to be so loving and so carefully given to another person has now become tainted, and you can't enjoy it the same way you used to.
Exactly.
And that's why there are people who are therapists who work specifically in like sex therapy, in relationships, in things like that. And that's just the first example that I'm thinking of.
Well, but you can even
in those situations,
you can even go back further. If you grew up in a stressed out household,
oh yeah,
then you think this is normal.
Right.
And you're in a relationship with someone where stress is not normal.
Right.
The two of you get very confused as to what's going on because neither one of you have lived in the other's household.
Right. And living in that stressful situation becomes akin to the Stockholm syndrome, where you get so used to it that when you don't have the stress, you become uncomfortable and therefore stressing yourself out.
Right. And we create it.
Horrible, horrible cycle.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why, I've done a lot of family work, looking at family of origin, including my own. And I've been amazed that some people have survived it.
Yeah.
And, but what they've learned is some dysfunctional ways of operating. And, they have to find out what is normal, what is really normal or calm. Maybe we shouldn't even use the word normal, talk about calm, peaceful.
Yeah.
And they don't have a clue as to what that's like. And so they have to be taught.
There's this interesting aspect of stress on the far back end when you alleviate that stress or that stress is no longer there. I remember when I was in high school and college, and I would have these big productions in these plays or these musicals or these concert events, and the whole semester and the rehearsals and the leading up to it were, I guess, callousing my stress level or my tolerance for stress. And then it's a very interesting process because you start out, you're all excited, and it's something that becomes normal and it's exciting. You're looking forward to it. And then as you move on, you get more stressed as the deadline comes for the performance. And you're like, okay, I got to get these lines. I got to get these parts, and I have to understand this and be there and learn this and do that, learn these steps, learn these notes. There's more stress that gets piled on the closer and closer you get. The day of the performance comes, and you get super stressed. You're excited. Maybe you're not comfortable. Maybe you didn't learn your parts as well as you wanted to. And I know maybe for some of you listening like that, you're like, yep, that's where I am. And I don't like that at all. But here's the funny thing. When I learned that I was in that operation of stress, I performed better. But what's funny is on the back end of that, I would get what was called stress sickness, where that immediate release of stress and the show was over, the concerts were over, all of that, mostly at the end of semesters, I would get super sick for like a week.
Right.
And my whole body would just kind of relax. And everything that my body was telling me, fight, push, keep going, let's go, let's keep going. All of that was gone. And I had nothing to kind of maintain or kind of slowly drop off that stress level
kind of thing.
And I would get so sick, and I would be like out for 4, 5, 6 days. And it was just kind of a normal thing until I learned how to manage the backside of stress.
Right.
So that's a very interesting thing to keep in mind when you're going through tough times.
Sometimes even doing a podcast, I have to have a little bit of stress and a little bit of anxiety because I think I'm sharper focused.
That's right.
But but you see, it's like everything else. There's a continuum. There's a amount of stress or a stress reaction that can be helpful. What we're talking about is keeping it in the helpful zone rather than the unhelpful.
Right.
And, to realize like some of the images, and sometimes it's particularly what you're describing before a concert or a play, there are all kinds of images that run through our head about how the thing can fail or how the people, I remember some of my presentations, I had the image in my head that everybody in the audience knew more about the subject than I did. And and that's when we get back into the imposter syndrome, where we say, they're going to find out I'm a fraud. Well, if you want to talk about stress level, it's out in the outer atmosphere.
But
that's our job, is to calm ourselves down because we're the only ones that can do it.
Yep. That's right. Well, as we talk about this and finish this up, what are some really good practical tools that we can use to both alleviate that stress on the front end and then make sure that we're taking care of ourselves through it and on the back end?
Well, I think number one is being extra, taking care of our health and our mental health, and just acknowledging, oh, I'm feeling stressed.
Mm-hmm.
How much of this am I going to tolerate, and how do I get rid of it? Exercise, deep breathing, yoga, anything that works for you to calm the stress down. Sometimes just petting the dog is a stress reliever, or talking to a friend about some stress. When you get it out of you and talk to somebody about what you're feeling, that helps to relieve the stress.
Yeah.
Right in the front end. And also just to use your intellect and say, wait a minute, I'm really making this far bigger than it needs to be. I want to feel, ready to go, but I don't want to have it go overboard because it's going to cause more problems. And I don't really need to feel that way to be successful. And if we can talk to ourselves in a kind and loving way, that is the biggest stress reliever of all.
Another one to add to that is the ability to talk and being open in communicating with your loved ones, your spouse, your friends, your coworkers, because you need to let people know, if you can, that you are stressed, because they may have solutions. And if you don't feel comfortable talking to your friends or family, go find a counselor and make sure that you are talking to somebody, because the longer you hold this stuff in, especially for men, the longer we tend to hold stuff in, the more it festers, the more it grows. And, we're known for being able to hold in a lot of that, world stress and be able to adapt to that. And that's just the kind of way we were created and designed. And it's something that's more normal, I guess, for us. But what's not normal is the debilitating factors that come with holding on to that stress. And you're not going to be any good to your kids, your spouse, your work, your community, if you are in a constant state of stress and not taking care of yourself. So just make sure that you're taking care of yourself, both mentally and physically. But
let me put a little addition to that about the contact with friends. Some of our friends may only hear that you're and thinking that we're crazy to have that kind of stress. Oh, you'll be fine. You'll do. That doesn't help any. If the person can just acknowledge, you're feeling stressed, and you've had this before, and you'll be able to get through it. But I hear you, and I accept that's where you are. Now, how can I help you to calm that stress down? No, in other words, acknowledging what we're trying to tell them, it goes a long way to help us to say, "Oh, you'll do fine," and denying it doesn't help any. So you can ask your friend
there's a place
to be supportive.
There's a time and place for that, for sure.
Yeah.
Usually when you're going through the stress is not the time.
It's not the time and place. Right. Right.
It's one thing to be in the military and to have a drill sergeant pushing you or being in a coaching situation, and you're putting yourself in a stressful situation on purpose. But that's a whole other episode for a whole other time. But so that's a very big difference there. Yeah, just be careful who you're reaching out to and make sure that they have your best interest at heart.
Be careful who you're talking about your stress with.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we haven't covered stress as much as we could, because we could spend months on the subject. But I hope this has been helpful to our listeners, and I know that as soon as I sign off, my stress will be relieved. And I thank you, Jonathan, for being on with me and talking
Absolutely.
about stress and giving different viewpoints that really is better than if I were just standing there lecturing and dying as I was talking. So anyway,
I love it.
I wish you all the best and look forward to connecting with you next time. This is Bill Lundgren with Jonathan Price, and this has been Blindside. If you have any questions or things you want to run by us, remember the feedback line, which is 720-712-8856. Look forward to hearing from you. Look forward to connecting with you in another episode of Blindside. Take care.